You're listening to the Marketing Attractions Podcast. Conversations on how nonprofit attractions are increasing attendance and sharing their missions through marketing. Your hosts are Ryan Dick and Jenny Williams of Attend Media.
Jenny, today's topic, 4 rules nonprofit attractions should follow when planning their ad budget. Oh boy.
Just a few little guidelines.
Oh boy. This is, I'm going through our notes here. This is like a Marketing 3000 college level class. This is kind of big picture, high level, if you will.
Well, I love to teach, so that excites me. But yeah, we'll kind of walk you through a guide that we use when we build our plans out. And it's a guide that you can use as well, or attractions can use as well too.
Yeah, this is kind of theoretical versus, there's some takeaways in here, but this is...
Every plan, I promise you, every media plan will still look different, even if you follow these guidelines.
Okay, yeah, it's not like a fill in, choose your own adventure.
Right. It's not that
libs.
easy.
Yeah.
No.
All right, got it. Yeah, and then, Jenny did an excellent job of putting together this content in a written form. It's available on Jenny's website, attend.media. You can just go to the site. It should be pretty obvious exactly where it is. Click and download. No emails. It's free. Just go grab it. So if you like the stuff we're going to be talking about today, attend.media is the site. All right. You ready? Deep breath.
Ready.
Yeah, I did some push-ups. I'm ready for this one.
A lot to talk about today.
Yes. Okay. Well, kick us off. Like, what exactly is this media planning guide for nonprofit attractions that you wrote and that we're going to be talking about in this episode?
Yeah. So I guess, first of all, this really comes from, we've been working with nonprofit attractions, or I've been working with nonprofit attractions over the last 10 years. I've been in the media space over the last 15. Some of these rules even come from learning from other industries outside of the nonprofit attraction space. But really kind of what I started noticing a trend of was whenever I started working with the new client or, providing, maybe if it's just in strategy or their media plan overall was, so we're kind of like doing like an audit on a media plan, because what do? You get someone's plans from last year. That's where you start, and you start looking at it and saying like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Or, you're kind of learning about what worked and what didn't for them. But one of the things that we would always notice is, and this is actually the piece that we notice from not just nonprofit attractions, but local advertisers in general is, they'd really be like spending a very low amount across a lot of channels. So, some of the guidelines that we've created here are really just from learning through doing those audits for local advertisers and local nonprofit advertisers, and just ways that we can make their money work harder, because at the end of the day, you don't always have a ton of money, as a nonprofit.
Yeah. So you're performing all these audits and you've kind of picked up on this trend. These are some of the things that most of your clients were doing wrong.
Yeah, doing wrong, or just could be doing better,
Sure.
So, just creating more efficiencies. I don't think it's like, we don't ever look at a plan and say like, oh my gosh, how dare you? But every dollar counts. And, again, especially when your dollars are less, every dollar is more and more important. So how can we kind of help guide you to build the most effective media plan with limited or unlimited dollars? We don't want to waste any. So how do we do that?
Yeah. So guys out there, if you're going into planning in the next few weeks, few months, go get the guide, follow step by step. We've got 4 rules that we're going to go through here. And Jenny, I think this is kind of a tool, a sidekick, our marketers can use to kind of put together their own plan.
Mm-hmm. We like to think of it as a way to stay disciplined during your planning.
Awesome. Okay. Here we go. 4 rules. Number 1, the bucket rule. What do we got?
So the bucket rule is really kind of our way of kind of defining how channels fit into your media plan. And it's a different way to think about it. I think a lot of advertisers are familiar with the funnel, right? Awareness, consideration, conversion. But what happens from a channel perspective, so TV, radio, social, is when you look at a funnel at the end of the day, when it's all laid out, a lot of these channels are in a lot of these different objectives, right? So our stages of the funnel. So my TV, or just all of our traditional media gets lumped into top funnel awareness, right? TV, radio, out of home. But there's the media landscape has changed. So as programmatic buying, right, which was really more of a tool that we use with digital ad buying, is now becoming possible in the traditional media space. We can tie more data to it. We can tie more attribution to it. So really, when we're thinking about awareness, consideration, conversion, like all of our channels to some extent can support all of these phases. I mean, think about like direct response advertisers. For forever, they've been using TV as a bottom funnel conversion tactic, right? They're running a TV spot with the expectation that the phone is going to ring. So for us, this was a way, this kind of bucket roll was a way to kind of reframe how we're thinking about our media channels, but because it's really more of our creative that's going to determine, is it awareness? Is it consideration? Is it conversion? What are we trying to tell the consumer to do? But from a channel perspective, we just felt this bucket rule really made a little bit more sense.
Yeah, you're kind of taking the funnel, the typical consumer journey funnel, and reshaping that into a lens from a media planning, media buying perspective.
Right.
Right. It's more about the channels, more about what our investment is going to go into versus maybe where a consumer is laying in that mysterious whatever funnel.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. So what are our buckets? We've got 2.
Yeah. So we've got it bucketed into what we call impactful and opportunistic. So I guess we'll jump into impactful first.
Let's do impactful. So all of your media channels, TV, radio, fill in the blank, you're going to put into either an impactful bucket or an opportunistic bucket. Correct.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So talk to us about impactful.
So when we think about impactful, we really think about media channels that have the ability to elevate the attraction's brand, right? Create excitement. And a lot of times this is language that we would use when we talk about awareness. But in this case, we're going to remove that and just talk about it's like high impact, a high probability my ad's going to be seen. Maybe have a longer message, right? Our storytelling formats, we talk about that a lot in the advertising space.
So I'm thinking this is like TV, a traditional big screen TV, a radio ad, a billboard, that kind of stuff.
Yep. So we think about like large screen, audio, high reach. So a lot of our traditional media channels do fit into this bucket. It's also placement first, right? Like I run a billboard, I know where that billboard's going to be. Even if you're running a programmatic out of home campaign, the space it's going to run into. But we know the placement, right? I know I'm buying a TV spot in the morning news. So I know if I'm watching that channel, I'm likely going to see that spot. So yeah, it's impact. It's expected to be in the placement that we bought. It has again, that ability to create that excitement and stand out in front of the audience.
And I'm also going to maybe add this. It seems like these channels, you mentioned placement. It's more like it's contextually aligned with quality content.
Yes, quality for sure. So this is where we're running through and making sure that we don't just have a TV buy that's running all overnights, right? So we're going in and really just ensuring that the buy is running in the day parts and the programming on the channels or stations that are going to resonate with our consumer the most.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one of the lines you have here is elevate the brand. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to be running on Jerry Springer.
Right.
Right. Got it.
Yep. And then I guess on the flip side, we've got our opportunistic. So the way we think about opportunistic really is more of a reasonable chance that our target audience can act on some type of purchasing decision or some type of action. So yes, a lot of our digital does fall into this bucket, but it's not to say that opportunistic can't drive awareness, right? Like Facebook can absolutely drive awareness, consideration, and conversion for any message that we're running, right? But it's opportunistic because now when I'm running that ad, I have a chance, a good chance of that person actually engaging with my ad, clicking to go into my website to find more information, or even purchasing a ticket online. So this is really when we get a little bit more to like our one-to-one messaging. So we might have a lot of different audiences that we're targeting. We're customizing our message to that audience versus like one-to-many, where we have a more general message, maybe in our opportunistic, in our impactful channels. We typically have that kind of one-to-few message in our opportunistic channels, right? We can serve a lot of different messaging based off of who that audience is. Our small screens are absolutely okay here. Short video, quick content. again, probably a lot more flexibility in rotating multiple messages because we need to get in front of that frequency needs to be much higher in this case to drive that action. So yeah, I think, and kind of on the surface, we might think of traditional is impact and digital is opportunistic, but it's not always. And I think we'll go through some examples of some channels as well too.
Well, okay, you've been talking a lot about influencer marketing or like creator content.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go through this exercise. And this is, your Marketing 3000 class here.
Right.
Let's say you've hired or you found some great creator content out there about one of your clients, fill in the blank museum. You've engaged with that creator, say, hey, I want to run, promote your ads with a paid ad budget. Like, walk me through the difference there. What bucket would you put influencer marketing or creator content in?
So the influencer marketing or creator content I would put in impactful. So I'm working with, a big, things to do Orlando influencer, and they're going to come to my attraction, walk through, share their experience, share their tips to how to, beat the crowds or best days to visit or best time to see the tigers, right? Like that's impactful, right? This is like production. This is great content. And so we would bucket that under impactful, even though most of the time that's getting shared in a social channel. That influencer content is impactful. Now, when we say, hey, we're going to now take that content that you created and run ads out of our channel in social, now we're going to bucket that to opportunistic, because now what we're trying to do, that initial content that the influencer has created is going to drive us some reach, some new eyeballs, people who aren't our current customers, right? Or who may not be. But we're also going to be focusing on things like engagement of the ad, like how many people are commenting on it and liking it and sharing it. And then when it comes to our ads, well, engagement is absolutely still something we're measuring. We're trying to now drive an action. So now we're trying to run an ad to promote that organic content to get them to go to our site, buy a ticket, come and visit. So the ad itself, we're going to bucket in opportunistic. The content that's initially created, though, we're going to bucket into impactful.
Okay, got it. Rule number 2, the 60-40 rule. Walk us through that.
So the 60-40 rule is really just a way to ensure some discipline in your media plan. So, local nonprofits, we kind of already talked about this, but they are a very broad audience. So we want to ensure that we've got mass reach channels to be able to reach a lot of people in our market. So we really like to stick with about 60% of our budget as impactful and about 40% opportunistic to ensure that we've got high reach in a market. When we think about from a reach perspective, a lot of times our opportunistic channels, especially for like adding a lot of targeting to them, can get very small. And while that can be great based off of a particular message that you're running, let's say you're running some, you're trying to drive in, a younger audience, and maybe you're running a particular promotion or message that might only resonate with them. So it's okay if my audience is small. If I'm putting like all my money behind that, like I'm missing out a huge audience that's going to make up the majority of my visitors. So you've got to be careful there. Like it's great to be able to create those different audiences and have specific messaging to them, but we can't only do that. We've still have we've got our millennial moms with young kids coming in. We've got younger singles coming in. We've got the grandparents bringing their grandchildren. Like your audience is typically pretty broad. We're not targeting, 25 to 34 only. We're trying to reach 25 to 64 in many cases. So there's quite a big mix that needs to go on, and we need that variety of channels that can help us drive impact and opportunity.
Okay, so 60% of your budget is going to impactful channels like TV, radio, outdoor, and
influencer.
Influencer, thank you. And 40% of your budget is going to opportunistic channels like paid search, paid social, display, buy the ticket now, convert.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And you mentioned discipline. You're doing this, I'm thinking like, okay, I'm halfway through my campaign, my annual campaign, and, attendance maybe isn't exactly where it should be. We've all been there, right? It's like, oh, let's move all the money to Facebook because that's what's creating the lowest cost per conversion, the lowest cost per ticket sale. And I'm thinking with this rule, this 60-40 rule, is you're setting some barriers, some guidelines with these dollars saying, hey, just because on paper this particular tactic or this particular channel is giving us our best, once again, cost per conversion, we can't just steal all the TV money and put it into, in my example, Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a trap. I think as over the years, especially as we, started getting more and more data with digital, we could attribute more of our conversions to our online channels. People started putting more money to them just because it was the only thing that they could prove out as working. I think there's a lot of changes going on in the industry now. A lot of changes in terms of what we're going to be able to track digitally, which I think is scaring some people to have them go back to adding more traditional because they're going to say, well, if I can't track my display anymore, I might as well run TV, right? So I think you've got a little bit of that going on. But there's also some interesting things that we can still do in terms of like tracking exposure to a visit inside of a park or, doing some other attribution. But I think the one thing when we think about, to your example about, okay, Facebook's working, our search is working, right? So that's got my lowest cost, so move more money there. I mean, if you start digging into it or peeling the layers of these channels, what's working in Facebook? Retargeting. What's working in search? Branded search. So if we're shifting more and more budget to some of those channels and we're not thinking about how we're prospecting new audiences and we're putting all the money into retargeting and branded for the conversion, then we're spending a lot of our money on people who are likely to come anyways. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be doing those things. Absolutely every plan that I run is going to have retargeting and branded in it, but probably at a lower percentage than maybe what a lot of people are spending typically in this space or really in any space and industry. And I think that's important because we've, in order to meet your visitation goals, in order to maybe meet some of your, diversity initiatives, right? Like you've got to reach new people and bring new people in. We absolutely want to be the reminder because we don't want to lose the people who are familiar with us and are already coming. But if we keep pushing more and more of our paid budgets to the high converting tactics, we're potentially losing out on, reaching this broader audience, bringing in new audiences and keeping, our overall visitation goals. And I think one thing that happens when we optimize towards a conversion is a lot of times that conversion, unfortunately for nonprofit attractions, isn't even a ticket sale. It might just be a first step in a process because they can't track all the way through. So just be very, very careful about putting too much of your budget against those. They need to be there. You should be tracking something on your site. You should be doing some type of attribution, but don't put all your money there just because it's the only thing that you can track right now.
Yeah, Jenny, you were just talking to a marketer who their agency recommended moving away from TV completely.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not here to scream from the mountain that TV is the absolute must for everyone, but you get that situation where maybe, once again, maybe you just kind of focus on what you absolutely can measure. You get hyper-focused on these metrics and you forget the big picture. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what that 60-40 rule is talking about. And I love what you said about reaching new audiences, especially for this space where, pretty much it's a local attraction and pretty much anybody in that local area is a prospect. Mm-hmm. That's who we want to be sharing our mission with. That's who we want to be creating excitement with is everybody.
Right.
So we need these high reach vehicles to share that message.
Right. And listen, your channel mix is going to, I feel like we've been saying TV a lot, like your channel mix is going to be dictated by your audience. And yes, absolutely. If you're like, well, our audience is
your audience in your market.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But if it's like, listen, no, my audience is strictly under 35, then yeah, I'm probably going to argue, don't put linear TV, don't put broadcast on your plan. But I think for most nonprofit attractions, it's pretty wide. Like 25-64 is what we're looking at. And you might have like one like specific audience within that you want to prioritize, but
let's talk about this because you're saying the 60-40 rule, 60% impactful, 40% opportunistic, that's at an annual basis. That's the kind of the 30,000 feet view. You know, if you're going after a specific audience for, you know, cocktails at the zoo, that younger demographic, you have a kind of a specific campaign. This rule can be broken, right? Like,
yeah, or even, you know, we've talked some on previous episodes about like a weddings initiative or plan, right? I have a very, very finite audience and I want to reach them in channels where they're looking for wedding content. I don't need to run TV spots for that, right? Like I don't need high awareness or, you know, that type of impact. But as a nonprofit attraction, if I'm running TV spots for my brand throughout the year, I'm running radio or out of home or some other impactful form of media, then my attraction is top of mind for this consumer. So when they are wedding planning and they do go into search or they do go into Pinterest and they're looking for ideas, when my wedding ad pops up, they're already familiar with who I am, right? So it's like, oh, great, they do weddings, didn't know that, but not, I don't know who this attraction is, right? Because if they have zero brand awareness of who we are as an attraction, what's going to make them want to actually, you know, book a wedding there too? Like our ad is not going to be strong enough in that, you know, in that position to be able to drive it on its own.
so here you go. You have to stay disciplined. 60-40 is the mix. And by allocating 60% to impactful channels, you allow yourself on a one-to-one or kind of one-off campaign, you allow the opportunity to run 80, 90, 100% of that budget in opportunistic channels.
Yeah. So some of those smaller initiatives can completely be supported by an opportunistic media mix.
You're listening to the Marketing Attractions Podcast, conversations on how nonprofit attractions are increasing attendance and sharing their mission through marketing. Your hosts are Ryan Dick and Jenny Williams of Attend Media. Attend Media is a media planning and buying agency specializing in zoos, aquariums, gardens, and museums. For more information, please visit attend.media. Now, back to Ryan and Jenny.
All right, Jenny. So we've gone through 2 of the 4 rules so far. 1, the bucket rule. You're saying put all media channels into 1 to 2 buckets. That's either going to be impactful or opportunistic. And your second rule was the 60-40 rule, that on an annual level, at an annual view, you're going to allocate 60% of your budget to impactful channels and 40% of your budget into opportunistic channels, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So rule number 3, the 5% rule.
So, mentioned this a little bit when we started, but, you know, going through audits, one of the things that we would see with local advertisers, nonprofit attractions, and other local advertisers over the years is really just spreading themselves a little too thin. So they're putting everything on their media plan. And this happens because there's sometimes you do need to, diversify that channel mix to reach a lot of the different audiences. So we usually do recommend and expect to see a pretty robust channel mix on a plan, but we are seeing everything on a plan. So a lot of times this could be like, you're trying to support maybe a local publisher or, someone's kind of asked you for those media dollars and you're like, okay, it's just a small amount, just give it to them. Like that happens a lot. And when we think about the 5% rule, there's no like right or wrong channel necessarily to put on a media plan, but it's just, if you're investing less than 5%, like what is the strategy behind that? Like, are you even like, what is this actually doing for you?
Well, okay, hang on. I think we're bearing the lead just a touch here. What exactly is the 5% rule?
So the 5% rule is that we only invest in a media channel if we can allocate a minimum of 5% of our total budget to the channel. And this sounds low, but like I'm saying, if you throw in that one publisher for the local, print magazine one time, it's going to be under 5% of your spend, right? If we, just dabble in TikTok a little bit, but we really don't have like a very strong initiative, and TikTok would be a platform, not a channel, but we're just dabbling in some of these social channels, a few $100s on TikTok, a few $100 on Snapchat, a little bit more on Facebook, but ultimately together, these are not actually going to exceed 5% of my total budget. Like that happens a lot. And I think we get into, or nonprofit attractions can fall into this trap of like just constantly testing a lot of different things.
And I'm hearing the marketing directors on the other side going, well, that's not me. I wouldn't do that. But you're saying you see that when you audit these plans.
Pretty often. Yeah. And sometimes it's almost like you're checking the box to say like, okay, we did that new thing that everyone said we should do, or we played nice with that one person and we just need to, we need to do that for a particular reason. But I would really start thinking through like, what is the strategy behind each of these channels? I'd say with a smaller budget, you're going to want that percentage to be higher. So yeah, if you've got, a $30,000 budget, 5% per channel is going to be pretty low. So I'd want to increase that number, but really ultimately this comes down to just not spreading yourself too thin. And I think with this, like a few things that we can think of. So we talked a little bit about like the local print publisher or the local, print magazine that gets thrown in on the plan for one ad. I'm not saying that there's any particular channel that you should be spending this amount of money in, but come into it with a strategy behind how that channel is fitting into your plan. So you may be in a market where those local print magazines, like you're trying to reach, maybe, moms with young kids, and these happen to be super popular, right? It could be a combination of local family websites and print publications. Like you could have a strategy around building some frequency in these, running ads on the digital and print side, and it works for you, right? Like that's where you hear a lot of people reference, like that's where they saw an ad for you to know about an event. So that's great. Spend more than 5% of your budget on it. So if you're not willing to spend more than 5% of your budget on it, it's probably because it's not right for your budget.
Ooh, well said. So I got a $500,000 annual budget. The mommy blog, mommy magazine, local magazine comes knocking. My thought here, or your suggestion is, if I can't spend $25,000 on this, then
remember it's the channel, not just the right. So no, you don't need to spend $25,000 on. You might not even be able to spend $25,000 on that one publication, but I might have a strategy to go in and run maybe a local publisher is kind of part of my like channel mix where it's like print and digital, and it's not just mommy magazines, right? It might be a few local neighborhood publications that I'm trying to get into, a couple of parenting local parenting magazines, maybe also piggybacking on their website. Maybe you've got like a creative loafing or something in your market. So some kind of like activity based pub. So those are all going to fall under my print budget now. And so, yeah, if I've got a $500,000 budget, I want all of these together to funnel up to 25,000, and maybe not for one campaign, that can be throughout the year, but I'm going to use these to create frequency among this audience. And if I can't commit to that, why am I doing it? That's the question I would ask.
This is discipline, right? Yeah. These guides or this guide, these rules are aimed to help you kind of get out of the fog of war, right? As our day goes on, like, can we really make this decision? Let's go back to the guide. Let's go back to the rules. Does it break some of these rules? Okay.
And I will say for some of these, you could drill down to like a campaign. So maybe you've got a 3, 4, 5 month campaign. And so maybe that's going to be a little bit less budget, but it's still going to exceed 5%, right? But maybe that campaign's $100,000 and I'm going to put, $5,000 behind a couple of print ads because they can be pretty cheap, obviously, with some of these local publications. But, some of these can drill down to a campaign specific level. But for the most part, I would say look at your budget annually, how you're supporting all of your media channels, and honestly, just go through and audit your current media plans or last year's media plans and just see like how many channels actually came under 5%.
And I'm thinking like one of the takeaways when you audit plans is you're generally recommending to cut channel.
Yes.
Once again, don't spread yourself too thin. You're looking to consolidate, build a strategy, properly invest.
Correct. And let's think about some of the pros to doing this. Not only are you going to create higher reach in some of these channels, right? So where you're not just like diluting your message across several, but you're freeing up maybe production dollars, because if you're doing it right, you're creating a message for each one of these channels that you're in. You're adjusting that creative to fit that channel. So you're freeing up some production dollars to be able to do that by not just saying, okay, hey, creative team, we've got 10 channels that you need to do this in. What happens is you get one video back and you've got to run it in every single one of those channels, or you get one type of image back that's just resized for every single channel versus thought through how it's going to fit into that channel. And if you're doing creative internally, I mean, like, can you imagine going to your creative director and being like, okay, I need this video now, converted for 3 or 4 different channels. And oh yeah, we're only spending $500 in each of them. So it's not really even going to do anything anyways. Like, they would just be like, I mean, their minds would just be blown, like, because they're not even thinking about it when they get the request to produce the creative. But then it's like, my God, I'm working like 10 hours a day to try to get all this creative done in time for this campaign launched. And no one's even going to see this ad because we're barely running anything in it.
All right. For all the creative people out there, this is minute 30.
Right.
Minute 30, 20 seconds. So go ahead and clip that and share that over with your media team or your marketing director.
Yeah.
All right. Ready to move on?
Let's go.
All right. Number 4, the social rule.
So with the 5% rule, we said we don't dictate what channels you should run. Every channel mix is going to be different. But the social rule, we do dictate a little bit.
Wait, so you wrote a rule breaking your other rules? Cool.
Not breaking. No, it doesn't break. It still fits. So it still fits in the 5% rule. But we actually recommend more here. So with the social rule, we think that nonprofit attractions should be spending about 10% of their budget on social.
And that's like at least a minimum.
Correct. Now, I would say yes, because smaller budgets, just like with the 5% rule, the smaller the budget, the higher the percentage. So you're spending $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. I'd like to see you more like 15% of your budget. If you are a nonprofit spending, $3, $4, $5 million, this percentage could be lower. But I would also argue that if you are spending that much money, you're most likely going outside of your local market. In which case your audience is getting bigger. So the 10% rule still works. I think in general, 10% of the media budget, paid social. Again, going back to auditing and spreading yourself too thin, this is the area where we see people drastically underspend. And I think one of the other reasons why we say 10% here is because there's a lot of platforms now that we can run in. So it's not just Facebook and Instagram. How are you building out a strategy to incorporate TikTok or maybe even some other channels like a Pinterest or a Reddit, right? Like those we've got another episode where we talk about campaign strategies for all of these channels, but you can't start getting into some of these other channels if you're not spending 10%, because what's going to happen is you're going to start stealing your budget from Facebook and Instagram, which really need to be kind of your workhorses in your social media plan. What you should be doing is saying, hey, I'm only running 2% here and 3% here and 1% here and some other channels, and saying, let's eliminate those, add them to our social plan. And now I can add TikTok to the mix. I can add maybe some Pinterest to the mix. I can add some other channels, some other support to the mix. I think, another thing is back to like DE&I initiatives. Everyone's not on Facebook. So you need to start diversifying the platforms in your social media plan or your social media channel mix to reach a lot of different audiences. It is not all Facebook. Again, Facebook, back to kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, like it's the channel that typically converts, and therefore we put all of our money there versus thinking through, how are people really using this channel? Like where are they engaging more and, interacting and commenting more? Like where am I standing out more? Where can I use better content or work with creator content? Like that's not Facebook. Like creator content is not really showing up in Facebook, right? It's all TikTok and Instagram.
And we did an episode a while back kind of talking about social media. And you mentioned something that kind of stuck out with me, like how CPMs have been rising over the last couple of years, but the budgets kind of stay the same.
Right. So that's another big thing. Like if you're spending less than 10%, and I see this on the plans a lot, right? They'll be spending less than 10%, but then the CPMs that they have kind of next to it for not their actual CPMs, but their planning CPM will be like $2.
Yeah, so like the estimated amount.
What they think the CPM is going to come in at for what they think their total impressions is going to be. I don't remember the last campaign that we've run on Facebook or Instagram that came in at $2 CPM. Like just once you start adding in some, I mean, even just like some basic targeting, creating a few different audiences. If you're running video, if you're optimizing towards the conversion versus just straight up reach, I mean, you're going to be in the $7 plus CPM range. So, I don't think that's anyone's like, I don't think there's one person like go back and be like, who put $2 on this plan and projected it?
But just copy and paste from the last year. Right. And you've been doing that for 5-6 years. And so what's going to happen is you've allocated the same amount of budget. Mm-hmm. You've underestimated how expensive, and I say expensive, but how much more expensive this ad platform has become due to its popularity. And when everything comes out in the wash is you did not reach, your ad dollars did not go nearly as far as you expected to in your planning stage. And I think that's your argument here is we need to increase these budgets. If we're going to play in this field, we need to increase those budgets so we are reaching, those reach and frequency goals that we expected.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, if you go through following these guidelines and you do an internal audit of your media plan, you're going to find cost savings, right? It's your media plan is a budget, and you've got to go through your personal budget and trim the things that aren't working for you, that you aren't using. And you've got to do the same thing with your media plan, because it is, we can be guilty of just being like, well, we had good visitation last year, so do the same thing. But you've got to constantly be changing. I mean, these channels are constantly adapting. Usage, consumer usage among different media channels is constantly changing. And I'm not saying that your plan has to be a total, completely different every single year, but you've got to be going through and looking at it and thinking through like, okay, what's working for me? What's not, where am I able to spread my mission and my message better so that I'm able to allow some of these channels that are better at driving a conversion actually work harder for me.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go through it. Just a quick recap. Number 1, the bucket rule. All media channels going in either into an opportunistic or impactful bucket. And you can get the full list at the website, attend.media. Number 2, the 60-40 rule. 60% of the budget should be spent in impactful channels and 40% in opportunistic channels. Number 3, and going back to that, the idea here is to stay disciplined. You need brand support as the year goes through. You're doing one-off campaigns, a big promotion for a big event. That's where you can go heavy into opportunistic, but don't steal from the impactful budget.
Overall,
Yep, exactly. And then number 5, the 5% rule. This is do not spread yourself too thin. If you're going to add a new channel to your mix, make sure you're coming in with proper weighting or a proper investment level. Don't just dip your toe into the water. Build out a strategy. Is this worthy of my plan, worthy of my dollars? 5% is kind of like, that's the minimum I need to spend in order to say yes. And then number 4, you're kind of doubling down on the 5% rule within paid social. One big trend that you're seeing is these nonprofit attractions aren't allocating enough dollars into paid social. CPMs have gotten more expensive. There's more platforms. Don't be stealing away from Facebook to go test other platforms. Increase your overall paid social budget. How did I do? That was pretty good.
A+. And what do we call this? Nonprofit media planning 3000.
And you know what I like about this is you're not just saying, hey, 30% to TV, 10% to radio. This is market by market, but these are the guidelines, the swim lanes that you have to stay in.
Right. We're definitely not telling you which channels to run because you're all local market advertisers, right? Like every local market is going to vary based off of the properties and channels available to you in that market, your audience,
every
the diversity mix in your audience, right? So everyone could follow these guides and have a completely different media plan. So this isn't the cookie cutter approach that gives everyone the same thing, but just gives you some guides to look at when you're going through and auditing your own plan.
Jenny, this is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Marketing Attractions Podcast. If you have a suggestion for a topic or would like to be a guest on the show, please visit our website at marketingattractionspodcast.com.